Tonight, on Decision 2020, join Nicole Hales with political commentator Linton Gordon as they discuss the highs and lows of the second general election debate between Dr. Nigel Clark and Mark Golding. Still tonight, EOJ reports that staff and polling station materials are in place for Election Day workers and members of the security forces to cast their votes on Monday, August 31. And General Secretary for the PNP, Julian Robinson, tests positive for COVID-19, while Peter Bunting tests negative. Good evening. As we continue our coverage of electoral activities on Decision 2020, join Nicole Hales tonight with political commentator Linton Gordon as they discuss the highs and the lows of the second general election debate between Minister of Finance and the Public Service Dr. Nigel Clark and opposition spokesperson on finance Mark Golding. Now, earlier today, our news team took to the streets to ask the general public who they believe won last night's debate. Here is what they had to say.
We listen to everything where everybody has said. But to me, look like him and him Nigel Clark when they pant up our next man, you know. Yeah, so, but I said Nigel Clark when he debate. He really have put it to the people what he will continue to do. And that's how I look upon. So really I put it to the people what he will continue to do. You understand? So that's why I say boy I win the debate.
So based on the comments that I heard, everybody was pretty much saying that it was a draw because a few points that they actually did answer and the rebuttals and so on, you know. And otherwise from the fact they also kept dancing around both sides kept dancing around the actual issues. So I don't know, I heard it was a draw.
Yeah, I clearly think Nigel Clark won the debate. Nigel Clark clearly has his facts, know the facts, and he was very good in bringing it across.
I was saying, boy, it could have been a little more relevant, but I guess Mark Golding. Because I think out of the two of them, he broke things down a little more simple. I think even though finance is a complicated subject, I think the Jamaican people want things to be relatable. They don't want to hear all the big terms. And Nigel Clark did a good job of saying out the big terms. But I think Golding was a little more simple, which allowed it to digest information better. But
Still making news tonight, the Electoral Office of Jamaica, EOJ, is reporting that staff and polling station materials are in place for Election Day workers and members of the police and military forces to cast their votes on Monday, August 31 from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. EOJ further stated that preparations have been made to accommodate voting for the 46,777 Special Services electors ahead of the September 3 general election. Now, this group is comprised of 11,512 police officers, 4,181 soldiers, and 31,084 Election Day workers. The EOJ is reminding Election Day workers, police and military electors to wear a mask covering their nose and mouths to the polling station and to follow the instructions of electoral officials regarding COVID-19 safety protocols. Still making Mello TV news, Jamaica Labour Party caretaker candidate Homer Davis has made an appeal to the Food for the Poor to stop PNP activists in the constituency of South St. James from distributing supplies on behalf of the organization. More on this story with Killeen May.
Jamaica Labour Party caretaker candidate for Southern St. James, Homer Davis, is appealing to the Executive Director of Food for the Poor in Jamaica and board member for St. James to take immediate steps to stop People's National Party PNP activists in the constituency from distributing supplies on behalf of the agency.
It was brought to my attention recently where surrogates and political activists, as also a councillor caretaker for the People's National Party, were in several communities in the Catadupa division issuing out items that came from Food for the Poor. It is not the issuing of the items that they were issuing, but it's the vulgar political partisan way in which it was being done. And of such, I wondered how comes someone who worked at the Food for the Poor office in Montego Bay could have given such latitude that he could have this large amount of items, agricultural items, given away in a very partisan and vulgar way.
Mr. Davis said the actions of those involved in the distribution of the Food for the Poor supplies is not in keeping with the mission of the organization and is calling executive members of Food for the Poor to take immediate and decisive action to have the matter addressed.
Because it is coming from Food for the Poor, and I know that the mission of the Food for the Poor is not to be politically partisan, to call upon the bishop himself, who overall is in charge of what happens there, that no items as it relates to agriculture items or those items is issued until after the elections are held.
Mr. Davis expressed that the people are tired of the handout politics.
These are political activists going around with representatives of the opposition issuing these things. And I'm sure that in doing so, they are hoping that it will enhance their own political success. But for that, I can say to them that that can't stop the flow of the people who are tired of that type of politics in South St. James. People are tired of the handout politics. The handout politics in South St. James has never benefited the constituency in any meaningful way. And the people have now decided that enough is enough. Enough is enough.
Reporting for Mello TV News, I'm Colleen May.
In other news tonight, General Secretary for the People's National Party, Julian Robinson, has tested positive for COVID-19. Now, in a statement released earlier today, Mr. Robinson said that after briefly experiencing some signs of tiredness, out of an abundance of caution, he did a COVID-19 test and was first informed by the authorities that his results were negative. He said that the Ministry of Health later advised him that the earlier information provided to him was incorrect, and under those circumstances, he decided to do another test, and the results have returned positive. Mr. Robinson further stated, and I quote, "Since experiencing symptoms, I have avoided contact with the party's campaign leadership and stopped direct campaign activities in my constituency," end quote. In stating that he is currently physically fine and feeling okay, Mr. Robinson says that he is now in self-isolation at home in accordance with the Ministry of Health's protocols and will not take part physically in the rest of the general election campaign, but will continue to work and monitor developments remotely from home. Meanwhile, opposition spokesman on education and training, Peter Bunting, has tested negative for COVID-19. Mr. Bunting was tested on August 24 and received a negative result yesterday afternoon. Mr. Bunting says he will continue to wear his mask, sanitize frequently, and abide by the social distancing protocols established by the Ministry of Health. As we continue with the news, the National Water Commission, NWC, is reporting that 2 of its workers have tested positive for COVID-19. The Water Commission says one of the cases is a water truck driver in Montego Bay, St. James, and the other has been traced exclusively to the Transport Department at its Operations Division at Morosco Road in St. Andrew. Operations at the department have been suspended and the agency is undertaking deep cleaning and sanitization exercises. The NWC notes that the department is separate from the commercial offices and as such that building remains open. At the same time, customers are being encouraged to use the NWC's online portal at www.nwcjamaica.com as an alternative. In the meantime, Grace Kennedy has announced the suspension of operations at its Grace Canning plant in Kingston, following 2 confirmed cases of COVID-19 among its team members. The Ministry of Health has been advised and both team members who tested positive for COVID-19 are at home in isolation. All Grace Kennedy team members who have been in contact with the infected persons are being tested for the virus and have been placed in quarantine pending their test results. Now, the company has advised that the canning facility will undergo extensive sanitizing and deep cleaning, and they expect to resume operations early next week. In other news tonight, businessman Everton Beachy Stout MacDonald, who appeared before the Kingston and St. Andrew Parish Court to answer to charges in connection with the murder of his wife, was remanded into custody yesterday. MacDonald appeared with only one co-accused, Aska Barnes, as his other co-accused, Donvelin Barnes, was not present. MacDonald was ordered to give his fingerprints to the police, and he and his co-accused were remanded until September 18. Tanya MacDonald's partially burnt body was found last month inside a car in Sherwood Forest shortly after 9 p.m. with her throat slashed. Everton MacDonald and his two co-accused were taken into custody almost 2 weeks ago during a series of coordinated operations in Portland. In news from St. Elizabeth, a 17-year-old boy is now in police custody following his arrest on suspicion of robbery with aggravation and illegal possession of firearm and ammunition following an incident in Balaclava in the parish yesterday. Reports from the police coming into our news center are that at approximately 2:50 p.m., the boy and another man allegedly held up a cashier at a hardware store in the community and robbed her of a sum of cash. The police responded swiftly to the alarm that was raised, and the teen was later found hiding behind a bar in the area. When searched, a .38 revolver loaded with 5.38 rounds of ammunition was taken from him. The boy will remain in police custody as the investigation continues, and his accomplice is being urged to turn himself in immediately. In news from the capital, a 21-year-old man of a Kingston 12 address is now in custody following the seizure of a Smith & Wesson 9mm pistol with a magazine containing 3 9mm cartridges on Halfway Tree Road this morning. Reports from the Halfway Tree police station coming into our news center are that at about 6:45, a team was on patrol in the area when they saw the man walking along the roadway acting in a manner that aroused their suspicion. He was stopped and searched, and a firearm with ammunition was found in a knapsack he was carrying. He was subsequently arrested. Now, the man's identity is being withheld pending further investigations. And those were the stories making news. I am Shelley Ann Hill. We'll now join Nicole Hales with Decision 2020.